Hello friends, this is your pal ZBH bringing to you a completely different type of video this time. So if you've been following the channel of mine for years, you would know that I am a comic book fan, especially a DC Comics fan. I do at least one Batman related video per year, and I've talked about things here and there like X-Men, different things like that. But one character I've never discussed in any length on my channel was Superman. That's why I'm here today with this very special video. Throughout most of my life, I never really gave the character his due as a foundation of the superhero genre and an interesting character in his own right. So today, I confess to you that younger me was wrong about Superman, and I want to share my journey from non-believer to fan. So for a little context about me, I grew up in the 90s and 2000s. There were a lot of prominent superhero cartoons and movies during that time period. Batman the Animated Series was the one that I watched the most, and I still really enjoy it to this day. Also, during the 90s, there was a Superman the Animated Series, created by the same team that eventually culminated into the DC Animated Universe. But as a kid, I didn't know that. The only thing I remembered about the Superman series was Shirley Walker's kick-ass theme song, and to this day I'm unsure as to what my disconnect was with that series. Perhaps it was the vastly different feeling that the animation and soundtrack evoked. My point with all this is to say I didn't really become a Superman fan until much later in life. So a few years later, circa 2012 or so, I saw the trailer for the film Man of Steel, and for the first time in my life, Superman felt epic. This would be the beginning of my fandom with Superman as a character. So I hadn't been much of a fan of Superman for the first 20 years of my life, but that was all about to change. And it's hilarious to me in retrospect that I decided to become a Superman fan in the 2010s, which may have been the worst possible time to try and become a Superman fan. To the uninitiated, pop culture has been obsessed with the concept of deconstruction in the last quarter century, and the fad's getting old. It was fresh and exciting in the edgy era of the new millennium, but like any concept, if it becomes oversaturated, even the good interpretations can be tiresome. The comics of the 2000s showed a surge in deconstructionist works like Garth Ennis's The Boys and Robert Kirkman's Invincible, which would eventually get their own adaptations. I'll talk about them a little bit more later. These works have analogs to Superman, which explore themes of absolute power being unleashed in a quasi-realistic society. Neither of these really represent a problem for Superman, given that they exist in their own continuities and have no impact on the DC Comics universe. But what I'll cover next will illustrate the problems with the deconstruction of Superman. Now we move to Zack Snyder's Man of Steel. When this film debuted, it was extremely divisive among comic fans and the general audience. So, to clear the air, I fell into the category of people that enjoyed it. So if you want to crucify me for that in the comments, feel free. Even as a fan of the film, I could nitpick the hell out of it and totally understand why some people strongly dislike it. So let's look at the positives. The film's visual effects and cinematography are immaculate, showcasing a scale of action sequences and quieter moments with the appropriate gravitas. The cast is spectacular and a hell of an ensemble. I just wish that the written material was on the same scale as those two aspects. Henry Cavill is absolutely my favorite part of the film. He embodies the humanity of Clark, showing his humility and uncertainty in his new role as protector of Earth. That being said, a lot of Clark's outward demeanor is stoic in nature. Stoicism isn't a bad thing with the protagonist, but it's a different angle for Superman that is interesting, but it's not for everybody. I gravitate towards stoic, introspective characters because I see myself in them. The character that I project in my videos is very different from how you'd find me in the real world. So now I have a Superman that I can relate to in a visually stunning action blockbuster. What came next for this version of Superman? Well, the DC Extended Universe happened, and it was largely a mistake that fumbled Superman as a character worse than Disney fumbled Star Wars. Well, that got dark and depressing fast. Let's try and remedy that situation by talking about the other DC Comics adaptation from 2013 that greatly influenced how Superman is viewed by the modern audience. Let's talk about the fun, whimsical world of Injustice Gods Among Us. Okay, I was going through sarcasm withdrawal, so I had to let that one out, despite my attempt at a sincere tone for the video. Injustice is a DC Comics fighting game that explores a multiverse storyline divided between two different universes, and how the heroes and villains change the other universes by crossing over into it. One universe is the canon or normal universe, with the other being a dark alternate universe created by a horrific tragedy. In the dark universe, the Joker unleashed a nuclear bomb on Metropolis that killed millions of people. In addition to that, he temporarily mind-controlled Superman and made him kill his wife, Lois, and their unborn child. So, as one would expect, Superman didn't respond well to this. Instead of letting Batman incarcerate Joker for the millionth time, Superman barged into the Joker's holding cell and, well, delivered a fatal punchline. Superman's grief and fury twisted him into becoming the most dangerous tyrant that the world had ever seen. But remember, this is the alternate universe, not our DC universe. So the story develops into characters from our universe going into the alternate universe to try to stop Superman's tyranny. Injustice is a game that I really enjoy, but looking back on it, I think that it might have done more harm than good to the public's perception of Superman. In the 2010s, it seemed like the world had become interested in Elseworld Superman, but completely uninterested in normal Superman. My main criticism of Injustice is that we don't spend enough time with our Superman. We understand the differences between Injustice Superman and ours, but we needed more of the traditional take to balance out the screen time of the character. I know that a game has different limitations than a comic or film, but I think that it could have been adjusted a bit to include more of the traditional Superman to help with the contrasts and conflict of the story. So we've talked about a couple of contentious Elseworlds of Superman. Now let's discuss some analogs to Superman in other universes that actually helped me on my journey to understanding Superman. I've mentioned a couple, but I want to discuss one that I read about in high school first. The Marvel Cinematic Universe began between the end of junior high and high school for me, and I was reading up on a few things out of curiosity. I came across a character named Bob Reynolds, aka the Sentry. When looking at the aesthetic of the character, the Superman homage is clear, but the character's backstory couldn't be more different. Instead of an alien baby landing on Earth and growing up to be a humble Boy Scout in Kansas, Bob was a human experiment in an attempt to create the ultimate weapon. His inclusion in this video might seem a bit strange, especially without the preamble of the other two. Well, fun fact about Sentry is he's always been here. We just didn't realize it until now. So with that existential nightmare in our heads, let's move on to the next character. Next we have Uncle Sam. I mean Major Glory? No, I mean Homelander. This character's influences are obviously a fusion of Superman and Captain America. Just take away all their morality, empathy, social graces, or likability. The TV adaptation shows a good amount of depravity, but the comic version is worse. Homelander's similarities to Superman are only skin deep. Like Sentry, Homelander was also a government science experiment that had gone wrong. A bit of irony with Homelander is that he's actually much weaker than his fellow Superman analogs. He's a lot more like Captain America if he could fly and had laser vision. He's one of the most powerful characters in The Boys, but if he fought Sentry, Superman, or the next contender, he would end up in a full-body cast or the morgue. Finally, we arrive at Invincible. Out of these examples, Omni-Man is the closest to being Superman. His origin coming from a nearly extinct alien race arriving on Earth and acting as a protector strongly resembles Superman. His power level is similar too, being able to lift impossible weights, fly faster than light, leveling cities with a single blow, and surviving in space, etc. Unfortunately for their world, Omni-Man is not the benevolent protector that Superman is. Omni-Man's true goal is to protect the Earth so that he and the Viltrumite Empire can conquer it when the time is right. We thought that we were dealing with discount Kryptonians, but we were actually dealing with discount Saiyans the whole time. The Viltrumites' attempted conquest of the known universe acts as a main conflict of the story. Superman is lucky. I'm sure that his race, the Kryptonians, were above such matters and would never try to conquer the Earth. At this point, the audience may be wondering where I'm going with this. Well, now that I've covered both alternate versions of Superman and his analogs in the comic world, it's time for the main event, the Man of Steel himself. Clark Kent, Kal-El/Superman, is one of those characters that's deceptively simple. An orphaned alien survivor being raised by kind, salt-of-the-earth people growing up to be a hero. But there is much more to the man than meets the eye. People get distracted by the bright costume and the flashy powers, but Superman has much more to offer from a character and story perspective. Because of Superman's immense strength and durability, most people would imagine he'd fight mostly overpowered antagonists like Mongol, Darkseid, Doomsday, etc. That would be one possibility, but that would be denying the true possibilities of his storylines. Superman does have strength and durability, but his most overlooked quality is actually his brain power. The energy that Superman absorbs from the sun not only speeds up his movement, metabolism, and healing, but also his mental processing. He isn't the smartest character in DC Comics, but he's no slouch and adapts rapidly to situations. When he faces characters like Brainiac, Lex Luthor, and Mr. Mxyzptlk, he must make decisive moves while adapting to the many different tactics that they would employ against him. He's constantly having to monitor situations that could escalate at any moment. At the drop of a hat, he would have to protect civilian lives, neutralize the threat, and keep his identity a secret. In addition to the day-to-day problems that Superman deals with, he's also an investigative reporter that does his own style of detective work, exposing whatever illegal schemes that Lex Luthor has created, or some overlooked social injustice that's hurting people. Just remember that Batman isn't the only detective on the team. The final thing I want to touch on about Superman is both his greatest strength and his greatest weakness. I believe that this is the linchpin of any great Superman story. His greatest strength isn't his literal strength, flight, or laser vision, and his greatest weakness isn't kryptonite, red solar radiation, magic, or anything like that. The most important aspect of his character is his humanity, or empathy, or value of life, however you want to say it. No matter his current power level, or his relationship status, or his living situation, Superman is always looking out for other people before himself. He's never too busy to help someone in need, always doing what he can to help. Despite his strength and kindness, he still can't save everyone. When he witnesses his father die, there's nothing that he can do in that moment. It's just a fact that there are things outside our control that we have to live with. For a being with godlike power, his struggle is so purely human. So even Superman must deal with things that he cannot change. But does he give in to despair? No. And we shouldn't either. When he sees a cat stuck in a tree, he never hesitates to rescue it. When he sees a girl at the end of her rope, he comforts her. When he sees people being exploited, he exposes the corruption of the system that caused it. Sometimes he can't bring about the needed change to society, but he never stops trying to make the world a better place. I want to share a quote not from a Superman comic, but from an interview with Peter Cullen, the voice actor for Optimus Prime in the Transformers franchise. When he was crafting the role of Optimus, his mantra was, "Be strong enough to be gentle." I bring this up because Optimus is also a paragon of virtue like Superman, and I think that this idea perfectly encapsulates him as a character. So hopefully I've conveyed to you what I've learned in my journey as a Superman fan. But before I leave you, let me highlight a few of my favorite bits of Superman media that I highly recommend for you to check out. The first is Superman the Animated Series, created by the same creative team behind Batman the Animated Series, as well as the rest of the DC animated universe. If you're looking for a fun take on Superman with great storytelling and emotionally mature writing, this is for you. I really missed out on this as a kid, so I truly appreciate it now as an adult. The second is My Adventures with Superman, developed by Jake Wyatt. This radically different take on Superman embraces influences of shonen anime, workplace and college comedies, romances, and old-fashioned science fiction. It is a very modern take on the Superman story, but without being pandering or annoying. Its interpretations and reinterpretations of classic characters and storylines are inventive and unexpected. On the film side of things, I have to recommend Superman the movie and Superman 2, starring Christopher Reeve and directed by Richard Donner. These are classics that inform so much of what we know about Superman, and if you're in my generation or younger, you probably weren't exposed to them nearly as much as other superhero films from just a few years later. Even though the effects are a bit dated, the beating heart of those movies has never been replicated, in my opinion. Also, watch the documentary about Christopher Reeve if your heart can take it. And people will crucify me for it, but I still recommend Zack Snyder's Man of Steel. It's different than most of the franchise and has some shortcomings that I've noticed in subsequent rewatches. That doesn't change the fact that it's a stunning film with a unique vision that finally awakened an interest in the character for me. Without this film, this discussion would have never happened. My final recommendations are two animated films, 2011's All-Star Superman and 2012's Superman vs. the Elite. This duology of comic adaptations showcases two different types of Superman stories. All-Star Superman is a story about Clark having to reckon with his own mortality while spending time with his loved ones and saving the world one last time. And Superman vs. the Elite is a story about morality in a modern world of extremes where Clark must reckon with powerful vigilantes that act as judge, jury, and executioner. Both stories put Clark through the ringer and deconstruct him effectively. But now I want to know, what do you think about Superman? What is your relationship with the character and his stories? Have you had a rocky start like me, or have you been a fan your whole life? Let me know in the comments. Also, what's your favorite Superman story? The adaptation, film, or TV series? I've shared some of mine, so I want to know what some of yours are. Are you excited about the new James Gunn film? And do you want me to review that after it's been released? Let me know all that and more in the comments. Sorry to interrupt the dinosaur content temporarily, but this is something special I wanted to do and discuss for years, so I wanted to get this off my chest. I hope you enjoyed my ramblings, like and subscribe for more, and I hope to see you on the next adventure.
It's not over, you budsy twit! If you think I'll just go to jail and rot, you're living in a dream world!
Good. Dreams save us. Dreams lift us up and transform us into something better. And on my soul, I swear that until my dream of a world where dignity, honor, and justice are the reality we all share, I'll never stop fighting. Ever.